Hello everyone, Namaste. Welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. I'm Roshan Karyapa. I have with me Abhishek Paul and Nirav Kanodra to run you through the news and events of the week that was. It was a pretty interesting week, I should say. There was an Economist article begrudgingly praising Prime Minister Modi for once. Then India has decided to ban wheat exports, right? Quite different from what our view was earlier. And there was also an important Supreme Court judgment on the Gyan Vapi Mosque. So all this and more in this edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. So before we run you through the news and events of the week, a look back at some of the episodes we produced last week. We had a very interesting episode on the Indian space exploration efforts. So we had scientists Alok and Kaushik talking about various things like the Gaganyaan and colonizing Mars and making bricks out of lunar and Martian soil and so on and so forth. The fascinating episode gives you some insights into what's actually happening on that realm. I would definitely encourage everyone to check that out. And then we had another wonderful episode, very ably marshaled by Nirav Kanodra on India's poverty scale. So this was based on the paper that Karan Basin, Dr. Surjit Balla, and Dr. Arvind Virmani had authored. Right, Nirav, that was a really nice episode.
Actually, so one thing was like the paper was like a shedding light. So this was like nice research shedding light on what's actually happening on the ground and taking into account. So a lot of the other studies are done from like a Western lens and not incorporating what other programs or what actual like in-kind subsidies are given to people, and actually looking at the efficacy of the subsidies reaching to the final mile, right? So I think obviously, given not a lot of people actually read, economic papers which are published in journals, I think it's a great opportunity, like for us at Bharatvaarta, to try and bring it to the common audience, right? So I think it was like I actually enjoyed that. I was actually heartened by the results and like the whole conversation. That yes, India has a lot of poverty, but the extreme poverty or extreme hunger has been warded off because of in-kind subsidies which were given, and the implementation was quite efficient. After that, I think on Twitter, I got a lot of hate as well because people are going through their preconceived notions. And so I think Ashish Chandorkar also told people to either read the paper or to like go through the podcast, listen to the podcast and see that what we're actually speaking about, right? So yes, but I think exactly that is why I actually feel happy that we're trying and like conveying this message to the masses. So I felt it was a great opportunity for me as well. And I definitely learned a lot.
No, Dr. Balla also said the same thing, right? I mean, people in India, can never believe that poverty has actually reduced, right? And I mean, this speaks for all of us. I think we kind of see it in our daily lives as well, right? It's very apparent. But things are improving, and definitely, it was heartening to see that there's optimism on that front, and things have changed over the last 10 years or so, right? All right, moving on to the news this week. An Economist article on Prime Minister Modi has actually praised him for once, speaking about advancements such as better GDP growth numbers, infrastructure projects, demonetization, and the India stack. The article praises the Prime Minister's performance when it comes to policy making. It also speaks about India's strengths, such as technology services and IT industry, along with the need to catalyze manufacturing. They also remarked on how the Modi government is more consistent and less corrupt than the previous ones. The article ends with a statement that hopes that Prime Minister Modi's, to quote, divisive politics will not affect India's economic modernization and advancements. Well, Nirav, this is begrudging praise from the Economist. What do you make of it?
Okay, so I think one thing is the Economist does this whole job where they write like 4 or 5 positive things and then they end it in like leave a bad taste towards the end in the mouth, right? Like, so I think that's not like a really done thing. One thing is, yes, what has happened is effectively what Economist has done is they've thrown the towel. That earlier they were saying that, oh, Modi's divisive politics will bring India's economy to a halt. oh, the pandemic is going to crash India's economy, etc. And they've been consistently negative about India. And, like the proof of the pudding is eating it. So like when you actually see that actual numbers are improving. Yes, so India, as I said in the previous podcast about poverty as well, India continues to be a poor country, right? It's going to from a poor economy to a lower middle income economy, right? There is a transition. I think a few things which they really have pointed out well. So they've highlighted India's strengths as well as vulnerabilities, areas of concern. They have highlighted quicker decision making and going for the second best approach, which leads to quicker action instead of waiting to implement the perfect scheme, right? So don't let the best be enemy of good, because if you can get it done and get it rolling faster, you have seen that in all the kind of schemes, the Ujjwala scheme on lighting or like building toilets, etc. It's not about getting it perfect. It's about getting it reasonably right and getting there faster, right? So I think gets the wheels moving. So absolutely, that's a great thing. They've highlighted the strength of India's technology sector, which is done very well. They've highlighted the PLI schemes that India is putting on, and the world is kind of diversifying away from China. So I don't know what has caused a change of heart for the Economist. As much as I would like to say that everybody is editorially independent, sometimes you also cater to your sponsors. And is it that, or are they looking at a wider market for Indian readers for their magazine? We don't know. Maybe it's all, but you can clearly see that they've had a change in tack. One thing I did not like about the thing is they have said is undemocratic policies. I thought like it is the most democratic. He has been winning elections democratically. No one has said that these elections have any sort of like malpractice, right? Not just the general elections, a lot of state elections. BJP has lost a lot of state elections as well, has won some state elections, right? So there's in India, the elections are quite what you would call as fair and transparent, right? So that was like a left-handed compliment or whatever it was. And towards the end, they talk about like his divisive policies. Now that is looking at it on a very biased lens. I think like all of these, if there is growth, there is growth for all. If there is welfare, there is welfare for all. Nobody's being discriminated against. And so I think again, they are like maybe looking at things from their biased angle. They've dropped one biased lens, maybe on one eye on the economy front, but on the other front, they still have some bias. But anyways, I think we do not need actual external validation. So as much as Modi is whatever he is, irrespective of what Economist says or what Wall Street Journal says or whatever, right? We do not need external validation, but it's a heartening sign that even your worst critics do find something positive to say about it. And so, yeah, that's what it is. And I hope like the government continues with this momentum, right? Yeah. We have a long way to go. A few things have been done right. A few things they haven't been able to achieve. But again, they've been democratic. Like in an autocracy, the farm laws reforms would have been passed through and not rolled back with an iron hand. Here you saw that the public opinion was against it. So then they were rolled back, right? So that is how a democratic system works. And hopefully we get more and more of such reforms and we continue the growth momentum.
Yeah. No, I mean, let me also clarify that we're discussing this topic more for shock value than for any importance as such. I think it's fascinating because they probably have hit the ceiling in terms of, baiting India haters as much, right? I think there's only a certain, number of people who would actually cater to the Economist or the New York Times kind of an audience. And we recently saw, I mean, last week as well, Netflix had this internal memo saying that, hey, I mean, if you are, ultra woke or if you differ with, certain views of people, I mean, that's good for you, but separate the personal and the professional, right? I mean, I think news organizations are starting to realize, I would say, and I actually see a bit of a course correction, because I think some of these organizations also, I mean, this is starting to hit their revenue and stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, I think this is a useful change. Abhishek, equally surprised?
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a surprise, but I think these guys have put in enough caveats as well. So it's like, so earlier they were saying, India is not doing well because of the new government or whatever. Now they are saying India will do well, but maybe they will not do well because of this government. So that's how the headline also goes, right? So it's like India is destined to do well, but will Modi screw it up? That's their sort of overall direction.
Right.
I mean, at least some good thing out of it is they have sort of done a decent job of explaining the what we have been calling Modinomics, right? Including talking about India Stack, Jam Trinity, Aadhaar, all those kind of things. So at least that's something which is very rarely brought up in the Western media. So on that front, at least, I think more readers outside India will probably get an appreciation of what is happening in India.
Yeah. No, I mean, I go back to what Harsh Madhusudan mentioned on the podcast sometime back, right? I mean, that, this decade, the 2020s, is India's decade, and we will grow. Right, the actual milestones may be off 1 or 2 years here or there. The numbers may be off, a few $1 billion here or there, right? But growth is inevitable, and however imperfectly we move towards it, we will definitely grow. So for people who are listening, do definitely check out episode 115 of Bharatvaarta, where we spoke about Modinomics with Harsh Gupta. It's a fascinating, overview on everything that the government is doing on the economy front. In fact, I mean, we will also be doing an episode shortly with Harsh, just discussing the current state of the economy, the markets, and so on and so forth. So that should be interesting as well. All right, moving on to politics. Ahead of assembly polls in the state, Mr. Biplab Kumar Deb, who was the Tripura chief minister, has resigned. Mr. Deb stepped down from his position after meeting BJP President JP Nadda and Union Home Minister Amit Shah during his recent trip to New Delhi. The reason given by Mr. Deb was that the party wished to give him organizational responsibilities, as it wanted a responsible organizer to take charge of the state's affairs. He will be replaced by Dr. Manik Saha. After being named the next chief minister of the state, Dr. Saha told reporters that he was a common worker of the party and will continue to be so. Abhishek, again, I think pretty surprising, right? I mean, a lot of people didn't really expect this.
Yeah, so Tripura is anyway a very small state which often does not get too much attention. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey for the BJP and Biplab Deb in Tripura as the CM. So to sort of summarize, I think BJP made some stunning gains, in the last few years to sort of suddenly come into power after a very long-lasting CPM government, right, which was there for decades. And it came, obviously with some good groundwork done in the region, but also with the popularity of the prime minister, right? And Biplab Deb was looked at as someone who was handpicked by the top leadership of the BJP. So in his time, like, it's been a sort of a mixed bag, right? So earlier on in his tenure, he was in the news for all sorts of wrong reasons, where he would make all sorts of outrageous and often unintentionally funny statements. But over time, he sort of, curbed that instinct of his. And, he's done well in terms of improving the economy, in terms of trade of goods with outside states. He's done a good job in terms of general law and order situation, etc. But there were also a lot of allegations of, some sort of charges brought against his government by his political opponents, like the CPM, Congress, and the now quite becoming TMC, which is now becoming quite strong there. So the charges were sort of similar to what the TMC government faces in Bengal, right? So it's a similar sort of politics, is often quite violent, there, right? And so just like TMC is accused of violence and intimidation in Bengal, I think the BJP was facing some sort of similar allegations there, right, in Tripura. So net, I think somewhat similar to what the BJP did in Uttarakhand, right, where they are trying to bring a new face with about 1 year to go before the next elections. So it will be interesting to see. So as I said, right, like Tripura, the growth has been like quite sudden and swift for the BJP. So obviously they have brought in people from other parties as well. And the new CM is actually a veteran Congress person in some ways. Like he was with the Congress till 2016 before he switched to the BJP and he became the BJP state chief in 2018. So I think the BJP state unit is quite rift with factionalism right now there. So if you read media reports about this resignation, like there was a lot of protests and people unhappy with the change as well. So it will be interesting to see how it pans out. I think Biplab Dev has spoken that he will now, and I think it's confirmed that he will now become the state party chief. So essentially, him and Dr. Manik are basically switching positions. The earlier party chief is becoming the CM and vice versa, right? So he said that, the organization needs to be strengthened before the next year's elections, and he will be working for that. So interesting to see whether this sort of move works for the BJP or not. But one thing is for sure, I think that TMC has sort of grown its influence quite a lot in Tripura, and I think they will also be a contender for next year's election.
All right, moving on to some economic news. Wheat exports have been banned due to a surge in prices. India has banned wheat exports with immediate effect as part of its steps to control the spike in prices at home. Only export shipments for which letters of credit have been issued on or before yesterday's notification will be allowed, the government said. Besides, the government will allow exports on requests from other countries. The notification issued by the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, DGFT, says global buyers had been banking on India, the world's second largest wheat producer after China, for supplies after exports from the Black Sea region dropped since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in late February. Nirav, this is like a flip-flop, right? I mean, last week, the week before, I mean, we had made statements that, we will export a huge quantity and so on, right? And now we have this. Is this a, miscalculation on the, forecast? What is happening here?
So I think, there are a couple of things. So first is, what had happened is that India kind of always focuses, or the mindset of all our policy making since the 60s is, we are short of food. So one is we don't allow, and second is we need to protect our agricultural sector. So we didn't allow a lot of exports, or did we import, especially like wheat and rice, the cereal staples. So the main reason was that we wanted to grow enough to feed ourselves. Now we are already growing more than enough to feed ourselves. The FCI food stocks are quite high, and we thought that this would be a good opportunity to export some of Indian wheat. But what has happened is that the wholesale and retail prices in India have risen, right? And because if you have an opportunity to export at a price which is higher than what your local market price is, the worry is that you might end up diverting a lot of wheat abroad, right? So then we might have shortages and further price rises here. So when you are in a closed economy, if you actually see the MSP price for wheat is 20 rupees a kilo, right? And the wholesale price is about 25,000 rupees a ton, so 25 rupees a kilo, which at the retail probably reaches 30 rupees. This till like last year was 20 rupees a kilo was higher than the price of wheat in Europe, right? Because Ukraine was growing enough, there's a lot of wheat, and so it did not make sense for India to export wheat to Egypt, for example, right? Now what has happened is that those ports of Odessa, Mariupol, etc. are stopped. And so they have to either take a land-based route or to go to Egypt. It can't really go there. So exporting to Europe is still going on through road. So those are blocked. Global prices of wheat have doubled. And now they are higher than our what you would call the retail price that a consumer pays, not at the PDS shop, but like at a private level, right? So the main worry here is that if we are allowed to export, then people would export, and this would raise our retail prices a lot. Thing number two is the consumer price inflation came out at 7.8%, which is outside the band, which is 2 to 6%. So 4% plus minus 2 is kind of what the target RBI has. In India, food prices consist of 50% of the CPI basket. Because given it's a poor country or a lower middle income country, bulk of like expenses for an average Indian is food. So I think this is your main concern is you want to ensure that there is enough food for all domestically. If we have surplus, we will export. I think with Egypt, some contracts are signed, so those will go through. What they don't want, or if certain countries do request to India directly, those will be taken up on a case-by-case basis. But what they don't want is like some people who opportunistically use this opportunity and divert food away from India, and this leads to a price rise, right? So I think, see, you have to, obviously, elected leaders, their first priority is their constituents. There are more consumers of food than private trading companies which could profit from it, right? So I think it's a decision on a balance. People did not expect food prices to rise so much, right? Earlier, it was just a small supply shock, but there is a shortage of ships, there's a shortage of container ships, etc. There are a lot of things going on. So I think it's a decision. You know, when the facts change, you have to change your mind.
Yeah.
So it is a decision. The government is tied up with a certain set of constraints. And as expected, they're putting Indians first. So there's a lot of criticism by the West that how can India be so irresponsible or banning exports when other countries are short of it, right? But India has faced like hunger previously, and only when things went to like a really bad level did we actually get foreign aid, right? So I think this is a pragmatic decision. Maybe it will be reviewed. And one last thing, what has happened is we've had a very big heat wave, right, in North India, and this might lead to a lower crop output. So I think the Rabi crop will be harvested sometime just before the monsoons. We will have an idea about how much were the yields, did they fall or no? But there's some estimates that yields might fall 10%, right? So these are the new things which have come to light. And because of that, they've decided to do this. Frankly, India is not alone. Indonesia has banned export of palm oil, right? So every country is working in its own interests. When things are under stress, you would see these things happen. When everything is normal, everything is fine, hopefully we can resume exports, and there's a new export revenue or a new source of revenue for farmers, right? So hopefully that is there. One thing I would like to remind people that a lot of farmers were protesting that, that MSP might be removed or MSP should be maintained. That was when market prices were lower than the MSP. Now today market prices are higher than the MSP, but farmers are forced to sell at the mandis, right? At that particular price. So you can't have it both ways. And maybe all these things, these kind of shocks will make people realize that things need to open up a bit more. But yeah, I think it is a decision which has been made looking at what kind of a situation is there domestically.
Yeah, no, you have to be pragmatic about these things, right? I mean, when facts change, you have to change perspectives. You can't be beholden to certain statements that you made, right? So, all right, moving on. The Supreme Court declined to pass an order on the requested stay of inspection of the Gyan Vapi Mosque. The bench headed by Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramana, said that it would decide on this after going through the files. Senior advocate Huzaifa Ahmadi argued that this is a mosque for time immemorial. Earlier, the court had appointed an advocate commissioner to carry out an inspection of the Mashringar Gauri Sthal at the disputed site, and directed him to quote, prepare videography of the action. This was then challenged by the mosque committee and the petition was dismissed. On Thursday, the court ordered resumption of the video survey due to be submitted on May 17th. Abhishek, this, I mean, again, there's a lot of controversy around this. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so it's a very old sort of dispute, right? Starting with the legal sort of proceeding starting from 1991, where, time to time, various Hindu groups have been petitioning courts to allow, inspections, etc., to establish that, at least part of the mosque has been built on, existing or pre-existing Hindu temples. And I think the current demand was for, allowing certain Hindu rituals to take place on some of the disputed sites, right? So the local courts in Varanasi had given the go-ahead for these videographic surveys to happen, and the mosque committee had basically approached the Supreme Court recently, right, for a stay of these surveys. So I think it came up before the Chief Justice of India, and he basically said that he does not have the facts of the case to give a ruling or anything right now either way, and he's basically listed the case in front of the bench of Justice Chandrachud going forward. But since he did not outright dismiss what came in front of him, the plea by the mosque committee, therefore the surveys are continuing on the ground. So basically that's the update. I think post that, I guess what will happen is that the surveys will probably get finished, and whatever comes out of it will get placed in front of the evidence will get placed in front of the court in Varanasi. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court will probably look at it more from a matter of principle, right? Whether at all what is to be done in a case like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems to be something. I mean, people are skeptical that it might set a precedence for things going forward. I think that is where a lot of the controversy lies. Moving on, a blaze at a building in Mundka, Delhi, claimed the lives of 27 people. Fire engulfed a 3-story building near the Mundka metro station. The fire started at around 4:30 p.m., probably because of an electrical short circuit on the first floor. It then spread to the other floors of the building, causing a devastating blaze. Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced an ex gratia assistance of rupees 2 lakh each to the next of kin of those who were killed and rupees 50,000 to those injured. Investigations have found that the building was ill-equipped to handle a fire, did not have an NOC certificate or sanctioned building plan, and was built on a plot of land marked for residential use. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal visited the spot on Saturday morning with Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia and said that those found responsible for this tragedy would not be spared. Well, this is pretty tragic. Kind of reminds me of some of the incidents that would happen during the 90s, right? I mean, it's been quite a while since at least I have heard heard of something like this. Yeah, what do you think, Neerav?
Also, I think a couple of things, right? So one is this is the sad state of urban governance bodies, the public works department or the municipal corporations, which kind of give all these NOCs. So one is India does have a code for fire and safety. It does have a code that what buildings can be residential, what can be commercial, how many people per floor. Here, if they had say 2 set of staircases, if they had the kind of a lot of these electrical short circuits happen when there is an overload of electrical power being drawn from one source, right? So if those kind of safety things had been taken into account, then there would not be such an issue. A lot of these builders, so one is obviously the construction was in a place where it should have been 2 floors, it was actually 4 floors. It was a commercial establishment. It had too many people working in there. It had a single one narrow staircase. So in such kind of commercial building, you should have like two separate staircases, so that if there's one which is blocked, the other one can be used, right? And sometimes you also have a fire safety door with like kind of which can lock out, like a steel door. So there is a safety code. What happens is, sadly, and thankfully fewer of these are happening right now, is this is I'm saying like colloquially, that when to give approvals, a lot of bribes need to be given, but the person sanctioning or giving an NOC is taking a bribe. They cannot even go back and say that, hey, this does not conform to the building code, right? Or people kind of put a shut eye, and there is a bribe given that even if without an NOC a building is allowed to operate, right? And without an occupation certificate, right? Then because you are taking a bribe, you cannot really enforce the standards. So I think this needs a rethink. This needs a rethink through the system. It's a good thing that the chief minister has said that, and like there has to be learning from this, that probably there are a lot of buildings, even in Mumbai, like a few years ago, maybe over 10 years ago, there were a lot of fires in old buildings where people had illegal extensions or illegal mezzanine floors with a lot of load, and the power which was being drawn due to multiple air conditioning units, etc., was higher. So I think these kind of things, we need to see that, not apart from having like a safety code in construction, we actually implement it, right? And so maybe hundreds of such other fires are prevented before them actually happening. Or even if the fire happens, we do not lose 27 people who died like this. If there were, like, say, fire extinguishers on designated parts in every floor, etc., and there's like a fire safety thing, that would be quite useful. So I think definitely we need a rethink, and hopefully we learn from this tragedy. This tragedy, obviously, we cannot turn time back and not have it. But now that it has happened, learn from it and prevent maybe hundreds of such tragedies happening in the future.
Yeah. No, city infrastructure, I think across India is a sad state of affairs, right? I mean, I can perhaps think of few exceptions, maybe Hyderabad, right? And that too in parts. And with people moving to cities, more and more people moving, I think it's going to just, be a lot more of a stress. And seriously, I mean, there needs to be some kind of a policy rethink, I feel, because oftentimes the development authority itself is perhaps one of the most corrupt, agencies in the state machinery itself, right? So, I mean, I sometimes, I mean, I'm shocked by how appalling things are in Bangalore. I mean, there's nothing called floor space index, nothing of that sort, right? I mean, you have people building 4 floors, 5 floors on a 20, 30 or 30, 40 piece of land. Yeah, I mean, I just shudder to think what will happen. Yeah. All right. In some tragic news, Australian cricketer Andrew Symonds has died in a car crash. Police released a statement saying that they were investigating a fatal single vehicle crash in Hervey Range, Australia. Police and cricket sources confirmed the former international cricketer had died. He was 46. The cause of the crash was still being investigated, but at this stage, there was nothing to suggest alcohol was a factor in the crash. Symonds was out of the vehicle or had been ejected during the crash and was being treated beside the car by paramedics when police arrived. The death of Symonds continues a devastating year for Australian cricket following the recent passing of legends Rod Marsh and Shane Warne from heart attacks. Abhishek, this is pretty sad, right? I mean, for those of us who remember the invincible Aussie team of the 2000s, Symonds was quite a character. I mean, he was an explosive batsman, somewhat useful bowler, and a terrific fielder. All around, I mean, I think he was a fantastic entertainer, I would say, right?
Yeah, it's such a sad news to get on a Sunday morning. And as you said, the trend of Aussie cricketers passing away continues. I think the entertainer word is probably the best way to describe Simon, right? Like, he was such a dashing and hard-hitting batsman, right? Like, yeah. Even if he stuck around for half an hour, he will definitely give you some superb entertainment as a batsman. And then he could bowl seam, he could bowl spin. So he was one of those unique people, right? Like you rarely get people like that. Like Tendulkar, for example, was one, right? He could bowl a bit of medium pace, he could bowl a bit of spin. So kind of a pure natural talent, right? Which you pick up from as a kid, and that continues through your international days. So yeah, and obviously as a fielder, he was probably among the top 3 fielders in the world when he was playing, right? Absolutely brilliant and athletic. And his background story is also pretty interesting, right? He was born in England to parents from different countries. Like one of his parents was Caribbean, the other European. Then he grew up in Australia. He had a chance to play for either country, I think England and Australia, and he finally chose to play for Australia because that's where most of his family and friends were. And so he felt more loyal to Australia. And then it took some time for him to sort of make an impact. But he really had a big impact in 2 World Cup wins, right? That is 2003 and 2007. And during those days, he was like one of the best players in the world. I think his bigger sort of descent started in that infamous Sydney test, which became controversial. I think people forget that he scored a brilliant 100 in that one as well. But that test is marred with controversy about the sort of spat that happened with Harbhajan Singh and then Simon Hayden, etc. So he kind of felt pretty betrayed by everyone as he went to court, and his sort of point of view was not taken or considered as the truth. So whatever the case, I think he sort of went into a bit of a downward spiral after that. But then he was back in the IPL, and he played a major role in the initial years of IPL as well, right? So, and he actually befriended many Indian players of that newer generation as well. So I was listening to an interview of Chahal recently, and he was telling how Andrew Simons had sort of become a friend and mentor for him, someone he actually speaks very regularly, almost on a daily basis. So that's kind of it was quite a good story to listen to, right? Someone like Simons choosing to be a mentor of an Indian player, despite what had happened with the Indian team in the past, right? So yeah, it's quite a tragic loss for the cricket fans around the world, and especially Australian fans. Yeah.
On a side note, I mean, I think that is the tremendous value that IPL brings, right? I mean, the fact that all these young kids get mentored by the best of the best in the world. I mean, Simons, for these cricketing memories, actually they just take you back in time, right? I mean, you can kind of see, smell, breathe the air that was there around that time. Simons was special, I mean, my memory is of him clearing the ropes like significantly. Like I don't think there's a single six of his that didn't clear like the boundary by about 5-10 meters or perhaps more, right? Because the guy was built like a giant. I mean, look at his forearms, right? I mean, huge forearms. Fantastic cricketer. And my favorite story of him is him and Matthew Hayden and another friend going on a fishing expedition. Off the coast, the boat sinks, and the 3 of them swim back, right? I mean, they swim for about 3 hours in shark infested waters to make it to an island, right? I mean, that's just the that's the perfect story that tells you about the tenacity, the grit, the perseverance, and just the sheer power that the man had, right? So very, very tragic, I would say. Yeah,
absolutely. As in, y'all have covered almost everything what I wanted to say, but like I'll just put it this way, that Simons is one of those cricketers where the stats don't do justice to the kind of talent, right? You would not like think, oh, he's like an all-time great. Probably actually does make it to the Australian all-time one-day team, right?
Yeah.
But watching him was so entertaining. Like if I have just had to add one thing, my favorite innings of his was, So 2003 World Cup, he made 140 versus Pakistan after like 2 wickets had fallen cheaply, right? So I think we can talk a lot more about him. He's a great cricketer. It's a very tragic thing. Passed away just at 52. But
46.
56, yeah.
46.
46, yeah.
Very young. Yeah.
Very young. And he was like active in cricket till like for Deccan Charge. I think he mentored Rohit Sharma as well. And I think the descent started at that Sydney test, and there was like a lot of friction in the Australian dressing room. And he recently on a podcast mentioned that there are a few people jealous of his IPL contract, which is $2 million for the season. And so there was a little bit of friction there, and there kind of he got dropped and unfortunately couldn't make it back to the Australian team. But definitely as a cricketer, was one of the most entertaining people to watch. Batting, bowling, fielding, everything. He was always in the thick of things.
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's just really sad. The guy had an opportunity to play for England actually sooner than Australia.
He took a couple of years to actually
he
said, you play for Australia and like make it through the Shield and take it from there. But
pretty amazing. All right. So next week we have a couple of interesting episodes coming up. We have Alexander Stubb, who's the former Prime Minister of Finland. Yes, you heard that correctly. He's the former Prime Minister of Finland, appearing on Bharatvaarta with Velina Chakarova. This is part of the Velina's Talk series. And they will be talking specifically about Finland's path to NATO membership, and considering everything that's happened with Russia, Ukraine, all of the stuff, right? I mean, you can expect some really good insights on this one, right? With Alexander. We also have this other episode, which is a translation of the Zafarnama by author Wing Commander Vijay Chatur. Right, he spoke to Ami Ganatra, who we've hosted on the podcast plenty of times before, and this should be an interesting conversation to check out as well. So a couple of very good episodes. Share, subscribe, do all of the good things, rate, review on podcast platforms, etc. We're producing some high quality content, and thank you again for joining us this week. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind. Thank you.